MBC FSP 54211. Today we're going to focus on the events of yesterday, the 12th of November. We saw two gatherings or meetings happen with regards to the 20. There was the finance, which included they called it the Sherpa finance, which that's what they called it, which included the deputy ministers and deputy governors in finance. It was opened by the opening remark of the governor, highlighting their main focus in the gathering or meeting, the main topics of discussion, and their emphasis in global finance. It was quite a very comprehensive welcoming that gave a broader understanding of the purpose of their meeting. As we know that it's through the emphasis of finance, as we know that there are two tracks in the finance and the Sherpa. It is only through us being able to resolve the finance issues and being able to fund, because the main thing that we're having as a problem is funding. That's what the president said in their closing. As we know, there was the finance Sherpa this side, and there was the bi community, or let's say the bi country between Angola on the other side at the Union Building. What he emphasized was what we want is money. Is it beyond the food they had for lunch? The main thing he enjoyed was the conversation or the smell of money. So the whole thing, that we can't talk development, we can't talk anything else besides us being able to make money. So our main issues that was for the Reserve Bank side, we're gonna have we're gonna have the Reserve Bank, or the finance side, which is the Reserve Bank and Treasury. That's what the meeting involved. It involved the deputy ministers and it involved the deputy governors. And then that's the finance. And then in the by countries, it was South Africa, Angola. It was the ministers and the presidents and other stakeholders, officials. The governor emphasized that the first is opening remark, made a joke on scarcity. As you know, as economists, the one thing that we highlight is scarcity. We deal with scarcity, scarce resources, and scarce and what. And he said one of the most scarce resources that we find these days is attention, and the emphasis of us being able to pay attention and making sure that everything that we do. It was a beautiful start of which just made everything interesting, and it made everything interesting and lightened up and opened up the mood. They emphasized on their take for multilateralism as the finance, the importance of multilateralism and international, or rather multilaterals, having to have a rather solid policy or stance when it comes to your finance, when it comes to your interest rates, your inflations, having a multilateral agreement, a way of working together in all the important indicators, regulating important indicators, making sure that we are in the same stance, regardless of whatever trade what can we say, differences we might have, as each and every sector has a trade difference. But what's important, enforcing and emphasizing the importance of multilateralism, making sure that we work together, making sure that it yields results, that it grows the economies of the countries that are there. As a group, that we form a strong multilateral relationship, that we're able to champion, because the G20 or the countries that would be implicated, we are able to champion any other, what you call this, any other barrier or shocks, and besides the shocks, any barriers that might come opposing whatever agreements we'd have as multilaterals, whatever decisions or whatever, because these multilaterals comes from rather a great and intense analysis of the relationship between the countries, the peoples amongst them, the needs of the people, what resources they have, what we don't have. So that rather puts a great emphasis on us protecting the multilaterals that we have, and making sure we rather we put it out at its most, that it helps the countries in question. So it was good to hear them emphasize on multilateralism, as we've seen that this is what has been happening. It might be in between two countries or within the groups. We know that there's multilaterals within the SACU, South African Customs Union. We know multilateralism exists within the SADC. We know that there's multilateralism that exists within Africa, with the Africa Free Trade. We know even the G20 has its own multilateral agreements, that would be your multilaterals within the even the bilaterals that are there within the G20. So it is international trade. We saw the minister of, that's other side. That's one of the key emphasis they made on the other side, when that's one of the reasons we see the minister of international trade and affairs being the one that leads the G20 with the presidents, because of the main thing of this this union, or the, what do you call this, the global, the multilateral, is to make sure that the international trade is strengthened. So multilateralism plays a big place in everything, and making sure that whatever trade agreement that we have historically are being maintained and are put in a good position. The third thing that the governor emphasized were the shocks, saying that what is important in everything that we're doing to date is that we must factor the shocks that exist within the market, or rather historically that have become the main identifiers of the status quo of our economies. As we said that finance is the key thing that we're going to talk about, that's going to help us go out of this. So our emphasis on the shocks that they mentioned, your COVID-19, your March 23, your banking crisis, what they emphasized is in these shocks that we have, we must be able to say that our mechanisms and approaches of saying that we're trying to fix our economies and trying to build a positive multilateral interrelationship, or making sure that our economies are put together, we must always put our approach in line of these shocks, and so that whatever shock absorbers that we put are realistic and speak truth to the current status of the economy. As we know that from COVID-19, our economies have rather got a bit of a shock from where they were. So our economy was in a particular, internationally or globally, we had a momentum that we were going towards. But because of the pandemic, number one, the economy and the direction it was taking rather got affected. So in our striving, or in our stance to try and build the economy, number one, we have a responsibility to try and bring it back to saying that whatever that we have lost due to the pandemic, we are able to pull the economy and put it where it's supposed to be, or rather our goals should be put in that particular direction, number one. Number two, then we strive to fight, or rather we try and raise towards where the economy was supposed to be. So we sit in a position of saying that whatever shocks that we have absorbed, we try and recover to saying that what we have lost to what we have accomplished. Number two, we try and get to where we were supposed to go. As we know that there are agendas at which we strive going towards. We know that we have your 2030. We know we have your 2063 that have been put as agendas that gives us a picture and a light of where we see our nation in a few years, or where our democracy should be putting us, or where the status quo of our finance should be. So it is very important that the shocks that we've identified in every model that we come up with, finance or in leadership strategy, strives to take the nation back so that we are able to see a form of continuity. We are able to see that in lapse of times, in lapse of leadership within these global communities, there is a form of continuity. There is a sense of hope that becomes revived to the people, to saying that this is the direction that we're moving towards as a nation. So we do see the effects or the impact of democracy within our people. After the shocks that have been identified and all this, the shocks it's rather very intense, and within the conversations that which they have, we see a great opportunity or strategy at which they come up with when they come together to rather bring back the economy, or rather make future plans for the economy. Number four, they emphasize on global financial stability. The governor emphasized on that it is important for us to strive for global financial stability. So we're saying that in all the shocks that we might encounter, in all the visions that we have put, in all the shortfalls or whatever that we come and see ourselves within, it is important that for us to put ourselves in a position at which we strive for global financial stability. So it stabilizes in every effort at which individually, as a multilateral agreement or as a bilateral agreement that we might have, or by a communal country that we would have, we still strive that globally and global finance still prevails, and we still continue to move forward. They emphasized to the issue of number five. It was the cross-border payments and payment systems. It rather brought a light into the addition of or the inclusion of your what is this, your inclusion of your AI, your what is this, your fintech, your AI, your fintech into the system. So when you talk your cross-border payment systems and your payment systems, you see the emphasis and the importance of putting in stable. It's installing, number one. Number two, the implementation of those cross-border payment systems and your payment systems. So it puts us in a very important position for us to say that all those payment systems, or the gaps that we see within payment systems, we are able to mitigate, and we are able to make sure that they are effectively implemented, so that whatever initiative that we find within our multilaterals, and whatever initiative at which we try and implement to rather mitigate the risks that we find within our shocks, is able to work, because the main driving force or the main direction that we're going toward is the fourth industrial revolution. So it is us getting closer to putting the economies, and rather the stances and effects of whatever agreements that we make as nations towards the fourth industrial revolution. Because the private sector might, to an extent, might push that the systems that they bring close, and whatever they introduce moves forward within the fourth industrial revolution. But at a certain extent, policy must accommodate, Policy must give expression. Policy must give accountability to the systems that which they are introduced. Thus, the people and their livelihoods must, to an extent, see the need, and their lives must be embedded in those rather systems that are being introduced for us to try and move towards the visions of the fourth industrial revolutions, trying to say that our people are getting closer to the fourth industrial revolution. As one of the mandates that which I know that there is a bi-communal that was emphasized last week or whatsoever, which rather had a rather great emphasis in one of our videos that we put there. The emphasis was on fintech and its impact. It was fintech, global payment systems, your cross-border payments, and the putting together thereof in trying to achieve a greater, in trying to achieve our strive for the fourth industrial revolution. That was from the first part, which was the deputies in the governors and the ministers, which was led by the central bank governor, Governor Leseja Kganyago. And then on the other hand, we saw His Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, and His Excellency, the President of Angola, President Lorenzo, heading another session on the other side, which included the ministers, which was rather a beautiful bilateral to watch, getting closer, as we've seen a couple of bilaterals get closer, and the president leading those bilaterals. We saw we've seen the president trying to get close to countries, and try and strengthen the relations from a head of state perspective. Yesterday we saw them get close to Angola, as there is we know that historically South Africa and Angola have a great they historically have a beautiful relationship together rather. Historically, in the founding, you'd find that one of the finding and driving forces of the South African direction, or you go to your politics or your visions and plight to for the development of Africa, you find that Angola plays a very pivotal or rather strong role in the history thereof. So one of the key things they saw them emphasize in that we saw ministers. It was rather you'd say it was one of the first, if you look at the way these bi-communals have been happening, because previously you'll see that it would be the president, but this one you saw the president and the whole cabinet rather, and it happening in the union building. It rather signified and showed us a change and what is this, an introduction of a new era, where, or rather a new idea or a new dawn, if you may say, that would show us a new direction of the nation. They emphasized on the common interest of the countries, the emphasis of the importance of highlighting and working towards the common interests of the countries, amongst everything else, making sure that the common interests that are brought forward are emphasized. We saw that the president, both President Ramaphosa, His Excellency was rather very happy, seeing that the opening of new ideas, new trade agreements amongst the countries. We saw President Lorenzo also coming up with them, also accepting that from the engagements and agreements that were made, that there should be common interest must be put forward in every resolution that becomes highlighted and all that. We saw an emphasis coming up on regional integration in the African free trade. The regional integration of the African free trade being one of the most important things. We know that there are rather free trades that exist within, and we know that there are other external countries. We know that you have your AGOAs there, amongst others. So they rather made an emphasis on the African free trade, as a form of a regional integration, they it being very important that we amongst ourselves, the agreements that we put together, our our focus and energies in making sure that these free trades um, rather do yield and become as effective as possible. Number one, it makes it easy for us amongst other initiatives or other agreements or other initiatives, to be specific, that we try and get. It emphasizes the finance side of everything, because if the free trade agreements are being taken care of and they become as effective as possible, it is easy for us to say that in whatever regional endeavors that we make, we have something that we work with. So it rather for the regional integration to be mostly for regional integrations to focus on most of everything. So it was one of those highlighting stuff. They emphasized external shocks, the us being able to fight external shocks. They went to external shock. I think that was outside now, the bilateral and the multilateral or the regional, saying that we start as we've seen. We spoke about shocks in the previous in the other side of the Reserve Bank and the finance. Those shocks were shocks that were mostly shocks that were towards the economies, or rather as an economy, at the economy or global finance perspective. But then now here we see them emphasizing shocks that would be working against the regional integration, or the shocks that would be working against those bilaterals. You understand? So we're talking a different perspective and a different light as we approaching. So the risk that is being identified here is saying that whatever that comes to us against us or against us as a region, it starts being something that we must start now putting emphasis to, that we must start taking priority to, so that we make sure that the growth of our regional agreements and the growth of our regional efforts becomes becomes a priority, so that we can trace growth and the effects of these agreements. They after the external shocks, after the emphasis on external shocks, the external shocks is a broad idea. We can take it from an economics, or we can take it from a head of state perspective, but the emphasis on external shocks was rather very perspective changing or perception changing moment, as it takes you away from your conventional or your ordinary your ordinary logic when it comes to shocks that are to the economy. But then now you start looking at it from it, a shock in the on the region itself. So it was rather a good point that was emphasized. um they emphasized on the development plan. There was an emphasis on the development plan, the 2023 to 2027. It became one of the highlights that was given, to saying that we must also look focus and put our efforts in that, um, amongst other things that were put there. I know there was a highlight of other plans that were put there, but then that is the highlight that which was put the 2023 to 2027 one. And then the emphasis of the state having a role as a regulator. So this was mostly on a perspective. I looked at it from a perspective of the growth in entrepreneurship and business. So this was mostly to say that we must come to a point at which the state or government becomes the regulator, and becomes it looks at the business and entrepreneurship from a regulator perspective, and make sure that whoever is playing in the field, they come as the people who make sure that they enjoy the game at which they're playing. So this was very important in an extent by saying that we must come to a point at which our business people and our entrepreneurs and all the other institutions that are there, they rather come to a point at which they are able to function on their own to an extent at which they themselves are able to drive the economy to an extent at which it puts the government or the state in a regulator and a person who oversees that people play fairly. So this giving us a responsibility to just make sure and strengthen our institutions and our businesses and our people, so that it is important for these players in the industry are able to rather stand up on their own. These players on the industry are able to bring the economy, and they are able to see the visions at which are carried or that is trying to be said by these agreements, by this. And if you could see, whenever there's this initiatives happening, they will find that there is a head of state side, and then after it being having a head of state of side, and then there is an emphasis on the business side, which would be taken with that particular effort or responsibility or with that attention. So when you get to the head of state side, so there was an emphasis that us having a vision and striving to get to a point at which the government or the state just becomes a regulator and oversees everything. And it was rather a great point to hear them talk about. And then they spoke about the stimulation of domestic mobility. There was a plan at which they emphasized when they spoke about the stimulation of domestic mobility. It was not noted, but there was this by it was a bi I don't know if it's a bilateral or multilateral initiative that went to the transport. I know there's a few months back there was the transportation, the emphasis on roads, and there was an agreement that the development of the roads, it was just I just noted it somewhere, the development of the roads, initiatives to make sure that the infrastructure is put there, is taken to the infrastructure is taken to the infrastructure is taken with great urgency, and the initiatives that already been put there, especially when you get to your roads, when we're talking your mobility, within each countries having to be able to do that, and amongst countries, so amongst countries, making sure that these agreements and these initiatives are rather given attention, because of the minute we start talking mobility plays a bigger role more than anything else. When you start talking trade and multilateralism and everything else, it makes the ease of countries being able to trade amongst each other, for us to be able to work amongst each other. So when you talk about your domestic mobility and rather your amongst the international countries, the mobility, it was and those agreements being able to, and the international efforts, or the efforts to make sure that whatever that we get to amongst the countries, we are able to make that work for the countries, so that we build a rather stable economy. Because without mobility or transportation or whatsoever, we might have all the digified and the fourth industrial revolution initiatives that we're going. But then if our infrastructure is not put there, if our infrastructure does not have enough efforts and all that, we're still having a problem. So it was rather a great topic to hear them talk about, and the emphasis in them, it was very eye-opening. It was great to hear them talk about that. The emphasis on digital innovation, amongst others. It was rather a few things which they emphasized when they got to digital information. It was digital innovation, and in finance, and they went to other sides. So the logic that came to me when they went to digital innovation and finance was to say, in whatever innovation that which is coming, number one, innovation, treating innovation as innovation, and our emphasis on innovation. Number two, saying the growth in digital innovation. So that would say that us being able to say that whatever innovation that which is growing, us being able to, number one, put it together within the innovation to finance, to saying that it becomes put together in the digital Arabon. You say that digital innovation, right? So we take the digital innovation and it being put together with finance, with in the financial in the financial existing financial systems, as we spoke about cross-border payment systems and all that, making sure that whatever digital information that arises, we are able to put it together in the global finance system. Number two, we are able to mitigate the risks that which they bring forth with. It rather brought to me a highlight or emphasis, or for me it opened up a conversation on our ability to take the innovation that we bring about. From the innovation, we are able to smoothly put it together to the financial systems or to the financial innovation that would exist or that exists to date. Because as we see, the finance side is always in pursuit of financial innovation. So we're saying that our innovation being put together and making sure it also is within the new digital innovation, so that it and the implementation thereof, of course. So to making sure that if a new system, as we're talking about cross-border payment systems, if a new initiative comes up, it is easy for us to come up and saying that the implementation of this particular system, its input and it being inherent to the new innovation, it being a standard and a benchmark to the innovation that comes forth, so that when we start talking about our initiatives for implementation, we start saying, now this is how far we are when it comes to innovation. This means that whatever initiatives that we should be putting to this initiatives of innovation and in financial innovation would be driving the development, or rather continuity goal of the countries forward. So it rather played, it was rather a very good topic to hear them talk about, especially in everything that is happening. So our pursuit in financial innovation and in the existing, when a few years back we started having it plays a big role when it gets to regulation, all that. When the introduction of cryptocurrency came about, the players in industry were forward than the government in making the regulation. We found ourselves where we have something that is existing, but the regulation that governs it, or rather the regulation that is supposed to put the nation at safety and everyone and whatever policy and whatever initiatives that are supposed to be taken forward, we were in a position of saying of being where we are led now by the players instead of the regulator being in a position of being able to stop them, so that there's fairness within the industry, or rather the direction being led by that. So we find ourselves in a position at which now the regulation, even in crypto would still continue, and we don't even have regulation that even coming to taxation thereof. We would go that in a day-to-day running after that. So it is important that our innovation and our digital innovation, that it is rather brought close to regulation, by saying that whatever its a benchmark or its outmost, we saying that we try and put a benchmark and it is enforced as a standard, so that it is easy for us to rather be able to pick up these things as time goes, so that we are able to mitigate risks that come as becomes of these shocks. It is rather very difficult for us to be sitting in a position of saying that we playing risk, or we mitigating risk from a position of shocks that we've seen on historic data perspective. we would only depend on historic data, but we still have statistical models and all these beautiful innovations that we are able to see. Instead of us taking a proactive stance with regards to them, we start now being the people who just know going against them. We'll be identifying risks that have occurred, and now our indicators, it's a mess. We start having now a system that is not dependable because of now our indicators work on historic data perspective instead of working on forecasts and estimations. It is very beautiful to deal with an economy that works on forecasts and estimations by saying that there is forecast. We strive to be in our forecasts. Our initiatives are on risks that have been identified in constructing those models that gave us those forecasts. Instead of working on historic data, no, the trend analysis for the past 5 years has reflected this. Then we'd be implementing policy on trend analysis instead of on forecast. And then at the end of the day, when we have to mitigate risks, we're talking about risks now that of things that have occurred instead of a logic, a proactive logic to that particular extent. So it was very great to hear them talk about that. And also from digital innovation and other sectors, of course, it was very important to hear about that. It was great. It really showed that these agreements, even though it was a date, the meeting, but we saw that we are going to a particular direction. They emphasized innovation and access to markets. The issue of access to markets was rather very a very beautiful, and a topic that really, I think, it's a topic that dominates your international trade, or your international multilateralism, your globalizations, your internalization agenda. Your access to markets, your tariffs, your barriers to entries to markets. When you get there, you find your barriers to entries to market. They emphasize, how do we mitigate, or how do we get rid of these barriers to entry in a way at which it will keep us comfortable? How do we mitigate these risks so that it is easy for us to be able to rather work together? In the inclusion of our innovation, that's our innovation being an innovation at which gives us access to the market. So whatever innovative endeavors at which we come with, they start coming from, there's innovation that comes because of the need, number one. Or rather, they should see the market. One would identify the need in a particular market, or something that is fashionable. But then there's innovation that is driven by a loophole in the system, or an innovation that is regulation driven. By an innovation that is regulation driven, we're saying that an innovation that is looking at the vision of a specific or a particular sector or market, and it is able to rather help in achieving the mandates, or what is expected in this development, in your agenda. Innovation that is driven in a particular agenda that needs to be taken, like they emphasized in the final point at which they emphasized was the sustainable development. They emphasized the effects and the importance of sustainable development. An innovation that is driven to saying that we have an agenda, we have a mandate of sustainable development. That's our innovation that we're trying to pull. Our innovation that we're trying to do is to make sure that we have solidarity, we have equity, we have sustainable, or we have development or sustainability. Innovation that would say only on an agenda of equity. But beyond those, when we're saying innovation that goes to access to market, or that is regulation driven, we're saying that innovation that would see that we have cross-border payment systems, and in the light of cross-border payment systems, amongst our multilateral agreements, or amongst our multilateral shocks and barriers that we find ourselves in, the systems that which we implement must specifically speak to that. Thus, when a particular innovation is being taken, or being chased after, or even considered, or even starts being named an innovation, it must meet the standards of the needs of these agreements. Thus, our definition of innovation will never be the same from last month or the last engagement that we had. In the next meeting that we have, we start having a different definition when it comes to saying what do we say is innovation, considering the status quo, considering the current macroeconomic atmosphere, considering the geopolitical risk that we face, considering the geopolitical fragmentations, considering the status quo of the economy. So it is very important that whatever the barriers we find in accessing markets are being able to be fought by the innovation that is brought forward. Thus, now our definition of innovation stops being an emphasis on one person being rather the most smart or one person being smart or whatsoever, but it goes to saying that we call this innovation because it has closed a gap, and it is easy for us to say that within the nations that which are involved in this particular engagement or this multilateral or this bilateral, it is easy for us to say that this innovation is a solution to us. That's now our emphasis. It goes back to saying that our emphasis and our initiatives must go and rather be a solution to those. So it was rather a very great a day to say. It really showed that there was hard work to be done, and hard work was done mostly. Um, we saw that it was it is easy to deal with a multilateral or bilateral when it's between just the minister of what and the minister of what. But the way it was approached yesterday, we saw those countries come with their really South Africa, Angola spirit. They came with that South Africa, Angola spirit. We saw them come with a unity, saying that you know what, we've done things before together. And even in this G20, seeing those ministers there that event was supposed to when they started there. Seeing those ministers lined up there saying that we are going to war now. When we saw when they came with the report at the end of the day, it was very good to see such happening. We even the discussions there, we saw that means that it must have been one battle when it came to ideas and discussions and negotiations. When it came to that, when negotiations, we mean when it went to the business side of it. So it was rather a very beautiful one. It was a great one. We hope to see beautiful ones coming again. But from what we saw here, I don't see anything better come from this, because of here we're seeing a rather a very a method that is rather that's speaking to the problems we're having. It speaks to international trade. It speaks to finance. It speaks to the state of the nations. The responsibility of the states. I know one of the agendas at which were emphasized. In the agendas or responsibility of the G20s was when they were going to when we were getting into this new term, was the governance, the emphasis on governance, and the making sure that the global governance, it was very good. It was a great session. This video is 30 minutes. Whoever gets to a point of being able to get to this point, it is very informative of where the direction of this G20 is going, and it will definitely give you a highlight of where to position yourself, especially when you are in business. Number one, when you any sector, or whether in regulation, or when you are sitting there and having a responsibility, what do I focus on? How do I talk? It rather comes up to a point of saying, how do I talk? My language must start staying internationalization, multilateralism, as the governor would say, scarcity. We must start having attention. Scarcity is a commodity. Scarcity is we have attention is a scarcity, is a scarce resource. So it was a rather beautiful one. Hope it gives you an understanding, and it opens up your understanding of this whole thing, and we grow amongst it. Tembisile FSP 54211.